Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a time when the day starts not with sunshine and birdsong, but with freezing toes, mysterious bites, and barley mush that could double as wallpaper paste. That's right. Welcome to 1325, a year with no electricity, no running water, and absolutely no personal space. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And please, let me know in the comments what time it is and where you're tuning in from. I know some of you are here from Canada, others from Vietnam, and probably someone brushing their teeth in Germany right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up, slowly. Mostly because you're wrapped in what used to be a blanket, and is now more like a large, damp burlap tortilla. The straw beneath you is poking your back in 16 different places, and one of them definitely just moved. Was that a rat? A flea? A tiny medieval gremlin? You don't want to know. You blink into the cold grayness of your one-room cottage. Your breath fogs up in the air, which is not ideal considering you're still technically indoors. You try to move, but your joints creak like a door hinge in a haunted castle. Everything hurts. Your spine, your knees, your pride. You slept in your clothes because, well, there's no such thing as pajamas, unless you count the one outfit you own that's slowly fusing to your skin. Around you, the rest of your family is stirring, or snoring, or both. Your younger brother has somehow cocooned himself in the entire family's only clean wool blanket. Your grandma is already praying in Latin. The family dog is curled at your feet, emitting a smell that could fell a grown night. You stretch. Bad idea. Something in your shoulder pops loudly. Someone across the room mutters, "Bless you," as if that's going to help. You roll to your feet, which land directly on a splinter. You don't scream, you just groan, like the straw mattress taught you. You pull on your cloak, it smells like sheep and damp earth, and stumble toward the door. There's no doorknob, just a crude wooden plank you slide aside. Outside, it's still dark. The rooster has already started its 45-minute solo performance, and you briefly consider adding it to your stew. You step out into the freezing dawn air and immediately question every life choice that led you here. Your first task of the day? Relieve yourself. There's no bathroom. There's a designated corner behind the house. No walls, no seat, just a hole and a prayer. You squat like a war-hardened yogi, praying the neighbor doesn't wander by mid-process. Wiping options? Well, moss if you're fancy. Straw if you're desperate. If you're really lucky, maybe a bit of linen that was once part of someone's underpants in the last crusade. Back inside, someone's trying to get the fire going. Your father is poking a few sad twigs with a stick and swearing softly. The flint isn't catching. You offer to blow on the embers. It works. For about 6 seconds, then dies. Much like your hope. You sit near the hearth anyway, soaking in whatever psychological warmth you can pretend exists. Your mom ladles out breakfast, barley pottage. Again. It's gray. It's thick. It's textured. You spoon some into your mouth and chew, wondering when it was last stirred, or salted, or identified. There's weak ale to wash it down with. Because water, as everyone knows, is for bathing pigs and summoning cholera. You sip the ale. It tastes like someone left bread in a swamp too long and decided it was mature. You begin your morning chores. Step 1, find the missing chicken. Again. She's escaped, again. She has a personal vendetta against your household and a brain that can remember exactly how to unlatch the coop door, but not how to avoid wolves. You chase her through the frostbitten village, past neighbors still half asleep and 2 pigs fighting over a turnip. The chicken evades you like a ninja. You finally grab her by the legs and carry her home like a feathered trophy. She clucks, defeated but plotting. Next, you sweep the dirt floor. With a broom made of tied twigs. You move more dirt than you collect, but it's the gesture that counts. Your older sister is mending socks. Except they're not socks, they're strips of cloth you tie around your feet in a futile attempt to avoid frostbite. She sighs and holds up a needle she carved from fishbone. You nod in solemn admiration. She is the true warrior of this household. Outside again, you haul a bucket to the stream to fetch water. It's cold. The bucket leaks. The stream smells like damp cow. You fill it anyway, knowing it'll freeze solid by lunch. On your way back, you're stopped by the village gossip, Old Nan, who wants to tell you about how she suspects the new baker is a sorcerer. You nod politely. The baker once made bread that didn't crumble on impact. Clearly, witchcraft. By now your fingers are numb. Your toes are wet. Your face has been slapped by the wind 3 times. You pass by the church bell, which tolls ominously, though no one's sure if it's signaling the hour or if Father Thomas just likes to show off. You're back home, just in time to help fix the roof, because apparently it snowed last night and the thatch collapsed. You climb up with a bundle of straw, a wooden mallet, and no safety rope. Occupational hazard, falling into the pig pen. And all of this? Just the start of your day. The sun hasn't even reached its peak. You're already tired, itchy, sore, and contemplating becoming a monk just for the free bread. But hey, you're alive. That's already winning in 1325. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. You're standing in the yard, holding a leaky wooden bucket, face to face with a brutal, undeniable truth. You need to go to the bathroom. And in the 14th century, that's not a private affair. It's a public test of bravery and your ability to withstand paralyzing cold. There's no toilet, no paper, no such thing as comfort. What you've got is a half-heartedly dug hole behind the chicken coop, where the wind slices through your dignity like a dagger. You crouch, clutch your tunic, and pray no sparrow flies by and startles you mid-crisis. Around you swirls a masterful blend of chicken poop, wood smoke, damp soil, and centuries-old mystery. You try to focus, but then, from afar, someone yells, "Watch out below!" which is code for human waste falling from a second-story window. You look skyward and plead, "Please, not today." Mission accomplished, quick, chilly, and horrifying. You return to the house and attempt to wash your hands. Soap? Dream on. There's a little stream behind the cottage. You dip your hands in and instantly regret every life choice that led to this moment. It feels like Arctic runoff. No lather, and the germs, still living their best lives. Some places in the village have what they call a communal latrine, a long trench with planks laid across it like medieval diving boards. No walls, no roof, just open sky and a swarm of flies watching the show. You remember bumping into old Martha there yesterday, both of you looking away, but giving each other a respectful nod. Back home, you check your footwear, or what's left of it. One of your leather foot straps is missing. You briefly wonder if walking barefoot to the fields could get you fined for damaging public roads. No one knows for sure. No one's lived long enough to ask. Meanwhile, your stomach is rumbling ominously. Last night's dinner, oatmeal mixed with wilted turnip, has begun a rebellion in your gut. You have no choice but to hope your internal organs are still up for the challenge. You take the waste bucket out to dump it, also known as your morning cardio. The path is slippery, the stones uneven, and you're wobbling like a circus act with a sloshing container of absolutely do not spill. A neighbor kid is walking next to you doing the same thing, grinning like it's a festival. You nearly avoid a disaster until a dog barrels through. Splash, surprise shower. The village applauds. You bow. Oh, and by the way, there was once a job called a gong farmer. Someone who cleaned out public cesspits for a living. They worked at night and were paid well, but no one wanted to sit next to them at the feast. You think to yourself, if this whole farming thing doesn't work out, maybe that's your calling. On big religious holidays, the church would recommend cleansing the body and soul, which translated to everyone lining up, to use the communal latrine before the holy procession. Fun fact, the average medieval person relieved themselves 2 to 3 times a day, with no plumbing and no sanitation crew. Just nature and blind faith. You recall your aunt once hanging garlic by the latrine to ward off evil spirits. The next day, the entire village thanked her. Not because the spirits were gone, but because it smelled less terrible. You return home to find everyone already hard at work. One person's fetching water, another's collecting straw, and you've been tasked with checking if the bottom of the bucket is clean. You sigh. This isn't living. This is scent-based survival. You fetch more water from the stream and splash it on the outer walls to cleanse the village. It's said to bring good luck. You suspect it just makes the mice happier, now that the ground smells exciting. You grab a straw broom and start sweeping the path. Chicken poop. Bits of straw. Cow footprints. Each has its own unique aroma. Each a new chapter in the unwritten epic of this village. As you sweep, you muse, if I live to be 40, do I qualify for sainthood? An old man walks by and says, back in my day, we didn't even have a hole. You nod respectfully and silently hope it doesn't rain, because if it does, everything you just swept will return. The eternal cycle of medieval life. And just like that, your morning ritual is complete. It wasn't just going to the bathroom. It was a full-body symphony of courage, digestive roulette, and advanced balancing technique on slippery dirt. And the sun is only just beginning to rise. You've just completed your medieval morning workout, which means you've both relieved yourself and stared down bacteria and public shame. And now, your reward awaits. Breakfast. You step into the house, where your mother, the only woman capable of cooking porridge with nothing but sadness in her eyes, is stirring a pot of pottage. Pottage is the eternal dish, surviving every day of the week. Yesterday, it was dinner. Today, it's reincarnated with the addition of a wilted turnip and a mysterious green thing that might be a leaf, or might not. The smell rises in waves. Onions that have forgotten how to be fragrant. Beans that sunbathed a little too long, and something that reminds you of that one time you nearly drowned in the pig trough. But your stomach growls like a war drum summoning spirits, so you're still excited. You sit at the table, a plank laid across 2 logs, next to your little brother, who's scooping porridge with his hands like spoons were forged by the devil. Your father cools his bowl the traditional way, blowing on it loudly to chase off the bacteria. You take a spoonful. It's thick, runny, sticky, and hard, all at once. You chew it. Yes, chew porridge. A metaphysical experience gifted only by the Middle Ages. You may be wondering, what did they eat for breakfast? The answer is, whatever was still edible, hadn't been chewed on by rats, and hadn't been repurposed for herbal remedies. Bread? Sure, if you had barley. Usually it was dark bread, hard as kiln-fired bricks. If you could break it, you were strong. If you could eat it without losing a tooth, you were legendary. Some folks used bread as chair legs, and accidentally ate it because they couldn't tell the difference. If it had rained the night before, the bread soaked up the damp like a sponge. Eating it felt like biting into moist soil. In some places, people would mash stale bread into the porridge for texture. This morning tradition doubled as dental training. Especially for kids teething, bread porridge was a divine rite of passage. And drinks? Small beer. Not because people loved to party, but because clean water was basically a joke. River water was a one-way ticket to meeting your ancestors. Beer was boiled before brewing, so it was safer. Kids drank watered-down beer. Elders drank warm beer. Tired people drank beer mixed with water, to stretch the supply. Some mornings you'd get last night's porridge thinned with rainwater. They called it soup, but really it was porridge trying to change careers. You remember once your mother accidentally tossed in some mint leaves, or so she thought. It turned out to be wild taro. The whole family had diarrhea for 3 days. Grandpa called it a spiritual lesson in gratitude. You called it a gastrointestinal disaster. Breakfast was also gossip hour. Who lost a cow? Who's getting married? Who's being accused of witchcraft because of a pimple on her nose? You weren't allowed to talk much. Children had to stay quiet when the porridge was still hot. You listened. Sometimes you chimed in, like, our chicken laid a square egg. Your mother looked at you like you'd just tried to join a cult that worships turnips. Occasionally, the family got a delicacy, a boiled egg. 1 egg, split 6 ways. Each person got a piece the size of a fingernail. The kids sniffed the eggshell afterward like they were searching for the meaning of life. Some households made blood porridge, cooked with fresh pig's blood. Tastes okay if eaten hot. Left to cool, it congeals into something between hair gel and meat pudding. You tried it once and dreamed of hell for 3 nights straight. There's a story about a man who accidentally ate porridge meant for the ancestors. The whole village punished him for eating a ghost's portion. Ever since, sacred porridge pots were marked with a red string and 2 swear words, just so the spirits knew to back off. At last, you finish your meal. Full? Number just not hungry enough to hallucinate anymore. You get up, take your bowl to the well to wash it. With your hands. And if you're lucky, the water doesn't have a dead frog floating in it. And that was your breakfast. A journey through flavor, logic, and the limits of human imagination. A ritual to begin a day where you'll stay hungry until lunch. You sigh. You glance down at the porridge still stuck to your shirt. And you think, if I ever insulted watery foe, I owe it an apology. Breakfast is over, and you think you're ready to hit the fields. But hold on. Before you grab the hoe, you have to get dressed. And welcome to the most exciting part of your day. Just kidding, it's miserable. Medieval fashion. Here, clothes don't express personality. They express how well you handle cold and how long you can tolerate itching. You have one outfit, just one. It's made of coarse wool, thick as a broken mattress. And when it gets wet, it feels like you're wearing original sin. Your base layer is rough linen. Over that, wool. Tunics with no sleeves, no collar, no sense of style. You wear it until it learns to walk away on its own. Shoes? If you're lucky, you own a pair of leather slippers as thin as onion skin. One rainstorm and they soak like sponges. Dry them out and your heels crack open like pottery. The soles are so thin, you can sense the emotional state of the gravel beneath you. You wrap a cloth around your head, not for fashion, just to keep lice from falling into your breakfast. Some folks wear hats made of sheep wool that look suspiciously like they've strapped a fluffy rabbit to their skull. And women? My condolences. Long dresses that drag across the ground like battlefield banners. Sleeves down to the knees. Skirts so wide, they qualify as tents. Not pretty, not practical. Mostly good for getting caught in the chicken coop door. In some places, clothing colors were dictated by class. You're a peasant? Then you wear brown, gray, or existential despair. Red? That's for the nobility. Wear the wrong color? You'll be fined. Wear it on purpose? You'll be burned. Color is a political statement. Pants? Rare. Most people wrapped fabric around their legs like medieval mummies and tied it with rope. Taking it off only happens when bathing, which, spoiler alert, only happens once every 3 months. It's an event. You recall the time it rained, and your sister's dress got muddy from knees to chin. The whole village thought she was an earth zombie. Ever since, she wears wooden clogs 5 inches tall, to avoid confusion. Sometimes there are fashion trends, like 2-meter-long hats that trail behind you like royalty. Some even attach bells to their hats, to warn the elderly of their approach. But if you mimic the upper class without permission, crime, pretending to be someone important. Punishment, hat confiscation, and a lesson delivered via beating. Fabric is precious. Weaving takes time. Dyeing costs money. So clothes are patched until they become a collage of memories and buttons. Your shirt used to belong to your grandfather. Before that, it was probably a curtain. People used urine to treat fabric. Yes, urine. It's softened, bleached, and, frankly, was the only available option. New clothes always came with a traditional scent. You learn to sniff without judgment. A leather belt is a treasure. It holds your tunic in place, lets you carry a knife, a pouch of herbs, and, when needed, a sandal. Lose your belt? You'll have to tie your outfit with straw, entering a state of quiet, low-level humiliation for the rest of the month. Everyone mends each other's clothes. Mothers mend for children, wives for husbands, neighbors for anyone who'll pay in onions. Some folks stitch initials on the sleeves to remember who owns what. One kid had a tunic with just an X on it. No one remembered whose it was, so they just named him Xylo. On village feast days, people wear their best clothes, which usually means the same outfit, but turned inside out. Those with ribbons tie them on their arms. Those without tie straw. It's a look. You might wonder, how did they cope with body odor? Simple answer, they didn't. When everyone stinks equally, the nose learns minimalism. Sweat, dirt, firewood, smoke. Together they create the symphony of survival. You once tried wearing an extra layer to look fancy. Result? You sweated like a pig trapped in a bakery. People mocked you for being fake fancy and made you strip in the middle of the market. Since then, you stick with simplicity and ventilation. Medieval fashion doesn't tell people who you are. It tells them how long you've lasted. Every tear is a storm survived. Every patch is a winter without firewood. If your shirt no longer resembles a shirt, it means you've made it this far. You step outside, your tunic flapping in the wind. Well, flapping because of holes, not actual wind. And now, you're finally ready to face a hard day's work, without worrying about losing what little dignity you have left. You've dressed, eaten breakfast, and relieved yourself. And now you think, what else could possibly make this day worse? Congratulations. It's time for medieval dental hygiene. Brushing your teeth in the Middle Ages was an act of intellect, endurance, and reckless bravery. Toothbrush? Nope. Toothpaste? Not even in legends. What you've got is a small stick called a chew stick, which you bite, chew, scrub, and then pray. No stick? Use your finger. Dip it in salt, fireplace ash, or powdered brick. Some places used a homemade mix of charcoal powder, salt, and dried mint leaves, or something that looked like mint but made your teeth ache all the way down to your soul. You dig through your tunic pocket and find half a dried basil twig. It'll have to do. You start scrubbing. Each scrape is like an SOS to the tooth fairy for mercy. The smell of charcoal, salt, and yesterday's chicken rises like a summoned ghost. You check your reflection. Well, in the surface of water inside a bucket. Result, your teeth aren't whiter, just foggier, like early morning mist suffering from depression. Some people use diluted vinegar to rinse their mouths. Effective? Maybe. But the side effects were obvious. Goodbye enamel and goodbye dignity. There were those who swore by brushing with honey, supposedly antibacterial. The real outcome? Ants. So many ants. And they don't give up. Did you know people back then believed cavities were caused by actual worms? Tiny creatures living inside your tooth, eating from within. The solution? Smoke them out. You'd hold a burning resin-soaked cloth in your mouth. Inhale, clench, cough violently, then declare, I think the worm is gone. Some people packed warm mud on swollen cheeks. Others chewed roasted rat tails. And you? You just clench your jaw and wonder, can I live without chewing forever? Now and then, someone gets a severe toothache. The cure? Pull the tooth out with iron pliers. No anesthesia, no countdown. Just a scream and a splash of cold water. If the tooth doesn't come out, they'll take the gums too, just to be safe. You remember your uncle once had the wrong tooth pulled. Someone else's gold crown. The barber surgeon apologized by giving him a fresh turnip. Classic medieval customer service. Chipped tooth? No one cares. Lost tooth? Congrats. You won't need to chew brick porridge anymore. Perfect white teeth? You're probably a witch. At mealtime, nobody uses napkins. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, or your neighbor's sleeve if you're close. Food stuck in your teeth? Leave it. If you must, pick it out with a chicken bone. Convenient and protein-rich. One village healer suggested rinsing with cider. You tried it. Result, numb tongue. Side effect, nearly proposed to the widow who sold it, thinking she was an angel of mercy. At festivals, people would hold a cleanest teeth in the village contest. The prize? A kiss. Nobody wanted it. There's a story of a knight who laughed so hard, his teeth flew out. Everyone applauded, then helped him gather them back like playing medieval Jenga with death. Kids didn't brush their teeth. They gnawed on raw turnips, licked salt rocks, and hoped their gums evolved. If one lost a tooth early, people said, the wind spirit kissed them. In reality, tooth rot won. You finish your dental routine by chewing on a mint leaf, or something vaguely mint adjacent, for 10 minutes. Then you swallow it. Waste not. Your breath now resembles a village breeze, faint but slightly deadly. You step outside, teeth still mostly intact, breath better than roadkill, and you're ready for a new day, where every toothache is just a gentle reminder. You're still alive. You've brushed your teeth with a twig, pooped like a ninja dodging wind, eaten porridge with the consistency of roofing tar, and dressed in enough wool to qualify as emotional armor. Now it's time for your profession, farming, also known as the economic model of pain before, during, and after. You grab the hoe, the family heirloom. The blade is blunt, the handle is bent, but people say, it's got a spirit. You sling it over your shoulder and march toward the field like heading to an execution. Except here, no one's reading your will aloud. The field stretches before you. The earth is hard as stone, and the sky is as gray as a broken heart. You start hoeing. Every swing rattles your spine. Every chunk of soil flips over like it's saying, "You can't catch me." You work without breaks, without contracts, without health insurance. They call it free labor, but really, you're chained to the land. You can't leave the village unless the Lord gives permission, and the Lord is too busy hunting deer and throwing banquets to sign your vacation request. You plow with muscle and ox power. Your ox, Margaret, refuses to work before 9 a.m. Today is some saint's day, and she's observing it. You pull, she drags, you promise her fresh grass. She gives you a look deeper than scripture. After an hour of fighting nature and livestock, you start sowing seeds. Seeds you had to buy, with taxes you paid. You toss them gently, whispering, "Please grow faster than the bugs." Time to water. There are no hoses, just a wooden bucket and your shoulders. You fetch water from the stream, slip once, spill twice, and by the time you reach the field, there's only enough for one overly optimistic plant. You look up at the sky. The sky looks back. No rain, no sun, just wind and a cloud shaped suspiciously like your landlord laughing. You squint with contempt. Suddenly, someone shouts, "Field inspection!" A steward from the Lord's Manor is coming to measure your plot. Too much land? Fine. Too little land? Fine. No land? Congrats. You'll still owe taxes, but now in radishes. You work barefoot, with no gloves, no sunscreen. Your hands crack, your feet callous. Your spine now naturally forms the letter L. The village children think you're a mobile scarecrow. There's no set time for lunch. If you brought food, it's dry bread and raw onion. You bite the bread like it's arm training. You bite the onion like it owes you money. You eat under a tree, in the company of flies and vague hope. You remember last autumn, someone fainted in the field. Too hot, too hungry, heart too weak. They dragged him back, poured water on him. He woke up and asked, "Do I still have to finish the row?" No one answered, because the answer was yes. You toil until dusk. Each hour feels like it drains a year off your life. At one point you pause, stare back at the village, and ask yourself, "Can I do anything else for a living?" Then you remember, you can't read, own nothing, have no time to learn a trade, and don't even own a proper shirt. So, back to hoeing. One friend once tried planting flowers instead of turnips, thought he could sell them for more. 3 days later, he was scolded for violating the divine order of agriculture. His flowers were pulled, and the soil was salted. Lesson learned. Don't innovate. You return to the village at dusk, hands numb, legs shaking, face covered in dirt. The first person you see is the village chief. He asks, "Have you paid your harvest tax yet?" You smile, the kind of smile that's too tired to be afraid. You hang up your hoe. Tonight is porridge again. Tomorrow too. And the day after that. But before that, you still have to beat the bugs out of your mattress, patch your mouse-bitten shirt, and pray the crops don't get eaten by pests. Being a medieval farmer isn't a job. It's a destiny. An endless loop where you plant hope in the soil and harvest tax bills. You sit down, legs stretched, too exhausted to feel exhausted, and you think, if I live another 10 years, maybe I'll be promoted to plowing the edge of the field, the side with less wind. Hope. Sometimes that's all there is. After a morning of tilling the earth, being disrespected by your ox, and slapped in the face by the wind like you owed it something in a past life, you long for something simple, pleasant, and nourishing. But sorry, medieval lunch is not the international buffet portion of your existence. You return home with fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, today's menu includes something other than porridge. Your mother greets you with that kind of patient look only someone who's stirred the same pot of pottage for 3 days straight can give. "We added beans today," she says, as if this is the greatest thing to happen since your birth. You sit at the table, also known as the multifunctional plank of wood. It's a dining table, emergency bed, and occasional onion execution block. The bowl of pottage arrives. Today it smells extra special, a medley of slightly fermented beans, dried onions, and the slow death of culinary ambition. You stir. Something round floats to the surface. Potato? Charred grain? A pebble that wandered into the pot? You scoop it up and bite. Verdict: jaw workout, soul injury. No main course, no side dishes. Every spoonful is a gamble. The big question: will this one give me stomach cramps? No one knows whether that turnip was fresh or had started a new life as a biochemical weapon. You eat in silence. Your little brother spins his spoon like he's training for a duel. Your father recounts the one time in his life he ate a full piece of meat, and that was the day he proposed to your mother. Some days you get bread with something. Something, meaning you can't identify what it is. Might be dried fish, might be mushroom, might be whatever the rats left behind after last night's banquet. If you're lucky, there's cheese, gray cheese, hard, sour, alive. One time, your cheese moved. Your mother said, "That's the yeast maturing." You thought, "That's an ecosystem." Water? Ha! As we've established, water is an assassin. You drink watered-down beer, not to party, but to survive. Some households drink boiled herb water, called health tea. You tried it once and had diarrhea for 3 days. Turned out the herbs were ornamental leaves from the widow's front yard. Some folks eat lunch out in the fields. They wrap dry bread in cloth, pack a raw onion, and sit under a tree. You tried that once. The wind carried your bread into the stream. The fish looked at you like they were judging your life choices. You didn't believe in karma until that moment. You remember Saints' Day last year. The village got special rations. It was a stew made from sheep innards, barley, and chicken feet. Your grandmother said, "Delicious," and then fell silent as you gnawed on an oversized bone. One time, your family managed to get a single egg. Just one. Boiled to extinction. Each person got a sliver thinner than parchment. Your youngest sibling licked the shell like it held the secret to eternal happiness. That day felt special, maybe because of the egg, maybe because no one fell into a latrine. You've heard legends of salted dried meat, the food of the rich. You've never seen it. People say it's actual meat, salty, chewy, and doesn't shatter your molars. You assume it's myth, like dragons, or paid time off. A friend of yours once caught a fat rat. His family celebrated like it was a royal wedding. They roasted it, ate everything, including the bones. You declined your share by claiming to be vegetarian. The truth? It looked too much like your former pet. You once tried to invent your own dish, rock salad. You picked every green thing in sight, added salt, and tossed in small stones to slow down the chewing. Result? 2 days of stomach pain and a scolding from your dad for stealing rocks from the neighbor. Eventually, lunch ends. You're not full, but your stomach has stopped yelling. You wash your bowl with fireplace ash, river water, and stubborn determination. Is it clean? Who knows? But at least it no longer smells like cheese that tried to kill you. And there it is. Lunch, medieval style, a dice roll with your digestive system. You might survive. You might spend the afternoon in bed. But one thing's certain. You'll be hungry again in 90 minutes. Congratulations. You've survived a medieval lunch. And in this world, not being poisoned counts as a win. You've finished lunch. Your stomach isn't full, but at least it's no longer roaring like a bear. You stand up, wipe your hands on your sleeve, because napkins haven't been invented yet, and prepare to return to the field. But wait, there's one thing you forgot to factor in. The weather. Medieval weather is not like modern weather. There's no forecast app, no little sun or cloud icons. Here, the weather doesn't just change. It has mood swings. It behaves like an ex with unresolved issues. Cold 1 minute, fiery the next, humid for no reason, and sometimes just screams at you through the wind. You step outside and are immediately slapped by the wind. And not a gentle breeze. No, this is the kind of wind that feels like the sky is trying to exercise your soul. Your neighbor's roof goes flying. Your straw hat gets carried off like a love letter you never sent. The sun doesn't know what it wants. Sometimes it peeks out. Sometimes it disappears. Sometimes it shines right onto your bent back while you're hoeing the field, roasting you slowly like a spit-roasted pig of sorrow. Summer? Not the beachy kind you're thinking of. Medieval summer is a mix of dry heat, communal body odor, and flies in biblical quantities. You once sweat so much your shirt changed color, and someone asked, "You go swimming?" You just nodded and cried silently inside. Winter. Pure survival mode. No electric heaters. Firewood is more valuable than gold. One night you woke up with a layer of frost on your eyebrows. You once buried yourself in hay for 4 hours and called it advanced medieval heat retention therapy. Spring? Only beautiful in songs. In reality, mud. Endless mud. Mud that clings from your heels to your hopes. You once sank ankle deep and had to be pulled out by grandma using the sleeve of a drying shirt. Autumn? Sounds romantic. But it comes with dry winds, flying dirt, and leaves that fall directly into your soup. You once ate a maple leaf by accident and thought you were poisoned. Your mom said, "It's cleaner than yesterday's turnip." You nodded, in silence. One time you just finished sowing seeds and, bam, rain, not drizzle. Biblical, ark-building rain. Seeds floated, soil melted, and you cried. The wind responded by throwing your hoe into the next county. Hail? Oh yes. Hailstones the size of walnuts, falling like divine rage. You once wore a wooden helmet to avoid them. It broke. So did your forehead. And a small piece of your soul. You once tried weather forecasting the old-fashioned way. If the chickens don't crow, it's going to rain. If the cat licks its fur, thunder is coming. If you wake up with shoulder pain, expect cold. Conclusion? You had shoulder pain all year. Your village has an old man named Barnaby, known as the weather sage. Every morning he looks at the sky and declares, might rain, might not. 100% accurate. Because the sky always chooses option 3, both sun and rain simultaneously. Once, during the harvest festival, it started pouring right at the opening ceremony. The wedding turned into a mud wrestling match. People still danced and sang, but deep down, everyone knew the weather had won. You once caught a cold from getting drenched in a sudden downpour. Grandma gave you moon-dried ginger water. It's just ginger water left outside overnight. It didn't cure you, but it distracted you with its sheer awfulness. Kids are wrapped in layers of cloth like little human dumplings. One kid fell into a puddle and lay there for 2 hours. Couldn't get up. You once pulled one up and found your hand stuck to their pitch-covered coat like medieval Velcro. On the rare nice weather days, no rain, no scorching sun, no gale force winds, people celebrate by working twice as hard. Because everyone knows, better hurry before the sky loses its temper again. And then comes night. The wind howls through the cracks in the walls, slips down your collar, and roars like someone's just insulted its ancestors. You pile on hay, clothes, even the sack you keep potatoes in. Still cold, still shivering, still thinking, dear heavens, when will central heating be invented? And so you survive, by dodging wind, predicting rain, soaking up sun, and enduring everything the sky hurls your way. You're not just a farmer, you're a weather warrior. After being slapped in the face by the wind like a karmic X and punched in the neck by the rain as if the sky itself was punishing you, you start to feel off. Not emotionally, physically. A scratchy throat, a little cough, some dizziness. You think, it's probably just fatigue. But in the Middle Ages, just tired often meant you were about to join the ancestors' fan club. You cough once, your grandma turns to you like you just summoned a demon. Did you just cough? She asks. Yeah, you reply. She nods solemnly. Call the priest. Medieval healthcare is not what you'd call healthcare. There are no white coats. Instead, you have herbalists, fortune tellers, midwives, and one special guy whose main job is to cut you open. The bloodletter. If you say, "I feel weak," the usual response is, "Time to drain the bad blood." You visit the local healer, which is a glorified goat shed with some dried herbs and a goat skull hanging by the door. He feels your forehead, flips your eyelid, then declares, "Your bile is bad." You're not sure what makes bile bad, but he starts lighting an oil lamp and preparing a small knife. The method: cut the skin to release the toxins. You wince. He reassures you. It's like a mosquito bite. You remember losing sleep to mosquito bites, so you remain unconvinced. And rightly so. He slices your skin, blood seeps out, you start seeing stars, and think, mosquitoes were never this dramatic. Some people treat headaches by shaving your head and sticking a piece of bread on your forehead. The bread must be baked with fresh barley, sprinkled with ashes, and marked with the letter A in chicken blood. You haven't tried it, but legend says someone got better after eating the bread out of pure hunger. Fever? They cool you down by dunking you in cold water and rubbing ginger on your chest. The result? The fever turns into pneumonia. To them, this is called progress. Stomachache? Drink boiled roots of an unidentified plant. If you throw up, good. If you faint, even better. If nothing happens, more bloodletting. You once stepped on a nail. It got infected. The healer smeared honey on it and covered it with clay. Why? Insects don't like sweet things. Result: the insects liked you. Some believed crushed brick powder was good for your bones, so they brushed with it and swallowed. That person walked sideways for a week. You remember your neighbor lost his voice once. The healer told him to suck on frog eyes. After 3 days, he could speak again. Sort of. His voice sounded like someone squeezing a bagpipe underwater. The village called it the voice of the divine. Surgery? It exists. With rusty knives, zero anesthesia. They tie you to a chair, shove wood in your mouth, and start cutting while everyone prays. One time, a young man broke his arm, and the healer snapped it back and tied it with vines. The arm healed, but it never straightened again. Some swear that eating raw garlic daily wards off sickness. You tried. People now call you the reversed dragon. For insomnia, you're told to sleep next to a black cat. Did it help? Unclear. But you dreamed you were being burned at the stake for witchcraft. Women? If a woman says she's tired, the diagnosis is often hysteria. Cures range from smelling roses, rubbing holy water on her forehead, or, according to one midwife, just get married already. Once, you had an earache. Grandma poured sheep fat in your ear and plugged it with cloth. The pain went away. But your hair smelled like roast lamb for 3 days. There's an old legend that if you walk around the church 3 times counterclockwise, your illness will vanish. You tried, it didn't work. But someone gave you a potato as payment to try again. Some healers use song therapy. They sing a 45-minute chant directly into your ear. Things like, "Oh foul spirits, flee like grains of sand." Most people recover out of sheer boredom. And so, you learn that medieval medicine isn't really about curing you. It's about keeping you so occupied that you forget you're sick. And sometimes, it works. You head home, your bloodletting wound now bandaged with banana leaves. You feel mildly dizzy. But you're alive. And in the Middle Ages, alive is the gold standard of healthcare. After escaping the village healer with just a few drops of blood and a personal vow to never cough again, you think maybe, you've earned a break. But no. You forgot one crucial detail. Today is Saints' Day. And on Saints' Day, absence is not an option. In the Middle Ages, the church wasn't just a place. It was the air, the law, the cosmic grandfather in monk's robes, who always appears just as you're about to curse. From the moment you're born to the moment you croak, the church is there. Like winter wind, uninvited, unrelenting, and absolutely everywhere. You're jolted awake by the church bells. Not gentle bells. These are bells that scream, "Wake up before the devil gets you." You throw on your headscarf, grab your nearly decomposed shoes, and trudge toward the village church. A 2-kilometer hike that feels like 20. thanks to mud deep enough to hold grudges. The church stands at the village center. Cold stone walls, wooden doors that creak like haunted complaints. You enter and are instantly hit by incense, layered over wet feet and hair that hasn't seen soap since the last eclipse. Father Abel stands at the pulpit, arm raised, voice booming like divine thunder. Today's sermon, the sin of sloth. Meanwhile, you're just trying not to fall asleep from last night's frost-induced insomnia. The sermon goes on, and on, long enough for your soul to wander. Someone snores softly. A baby cries. An old lady beside you whispers prayers while counting dried beans instead of rosary beads. You try to concentrate, but your stomach growls, your back aches, your legs go numb. Suddenly, Father Abel stops. He locks eyes with you. You. Did you eat on a fasting day? Panic. You only had porridge, no meat. Maybe the onion raised suspicions. You stammer. He stares for 3 more seconds, then resumes preaching. You exhale. This man might not read minds, but he sure makes you think he can. The church doesn't just preach. It taxes. It collects land. It even hoards secrets. Want to get married? You need Father Abel's blessing. Want to trade goods? Better be pre-approved. Want to name your baby? Better be a name off God's approved list. Someone once named their kid Luke, not in the Bible. Result? Forced to rename him Benedict, and publicly apologize for linguistic blasphemy. Ever since, people flip through scripture like it's a baby name catalog. The church also runs the local justice system. Accused of witchcraft, heresy, or just giving Father Abel a dirty look? Prepare for trial. Method, tossed into the river. If you float, witch. If you sink, innocent, but dead. One man was once charged with mocking the sermon in his heart. Punishment? Kneel at the church door for 3 days reciting, "I know nothing," 100 times daily. Outcome? He memorized the entire liturgy and got promoted to assistant. You've been to a mass confession. The whole village lines up, confessing their tiniest sins. You whisper, "I once stole a turnip." Father Abel nods, blesses you, then asks, "What day was that?" Silence. If it was a fasting day, you're toast. Religious festivals happen constantly. Most honor a saint, a miracle, or a story nobody fully understands anymore. But everyone still celebrates. By fasting, parading candles, or dancing in circles around trees like confused squirrels. Once, you were assigned to light the ceremonial candle. It was as long as your arm and weighed as much as your sins. You dropped it. Nearly got accused of ritual sabotage. Your punishment? A week of hauling water to cleanse your karma. Children must memorize prayers from an early age. You were once slapped for misreading a blessing. The line was, "God blesses the humble." You said, "God blesses the late sleepers." It was accurate. For you. Theologically? Less so. You once saw a noble scolded publicly for arriving late to morning mass. Father Abel said, "Even with a horse, you cannot outride time." The village clapped. The noble bowed. You snorted. And yet, despite all the intensity, the church is where people connect. It's the medieval social media. People share gossip, trade news, and occasionally, flirt. You remember a girl once accidentally dropped her handkerchief during the saint's procession. You picked it up. She smiled. 6 months later, you were married. Reason? God's plan. The church is the final boss. Not because it's evil, but because it decides who lives right, who lives wrong, and who lives wrong but gets forgiven. For the right price. You walk home. Your feet are numb. Your butt aches from the pew. But your mind feels lighter. At least you weren't accused of heresy today. At least your name is still on the living list. And in the Middle Ages, that's reason enough to thank God. If you thought living in the Middle Ages was already a nightmare, congratulations. Let's crank the difficulty from survival mode to hardcore permadeath. Because now, you're a woman. As a girl in the village, you wake up before the rooster. Not to meditate or sip tea, but to light the fire, haul water, make porridge, and scoop chicken poop with your bare hands. By the time the rooster yawns, you've already done housework, farm chores, and silently accepted responsibility for why it suddenly started raining. People say, women are the backbone of the household. But really, you're the roof, the foundation, and probably the pig pen too. Every invisible task lands on your shoulders. Spinning thread, weaving cloth, raising kids, tending in-laws, herding pigs, wrapping dumplings, and all without complaining. Ever. You wear long, heavy dresses, about as comfortable as local gossip. Go to work. Your skirt drags through mud. Go to market. It gets caught in ox cart wheels. Go to church. You're told your dress is too flashy, even though it's literally made from an old curtain. You're not allowed to learn to read, unless you're a noble, and even then, just enough to write apology letters on behalf of your husband. Once married, you lose all property. Everything belongs to your husband, including your opinions. Marriageable age? Around 12 to 14. Just as you're retiring from skipping rope, you're matched with a middle-aged farmer with a beard, 3 teeth, and an inheritance claim on your uterus. Weddings aren't love stories. They're land deals or economic negotiations. Your mother gives you a pep talk. As long as he doesn't hit you with a hammer, it's a good marriage. Once married, you move into his house, serve his family, and produce heirs. If you can't, you're considered cursed. Some villages send you to the priest to pray for fertility blessings. Giving birth is a horror show. No painkillers, no nurses, just the village midwife. Usually an elderly woman who's delivered 10 babies and 2 goats. You bite a rag, scream into the rafters, and hope your child makes it past winter. If your baby lives, great. If not, people blame you for lacking virtue. Some will whisper that your baby's birthmark looks like a worm, and suddenly, you're a witch. You remember your aunt, a healer who used herbs. They called her a witch, forced her to stand in the rain for 3 nights to wash off the magic. She came out cured of arthritis. Everyone called it a miracle. Nobody apologized. You aren't taught to read, but you're expected to know everything else. Sewing, mending, weaving baskets, making cheese, making candles, and interpreting your mother-in-law's thoughts via eyebrow twitch. Smile too much? Flirt? Speak too loudly? Unladylike. Stay silent? Suspicious. In short, you're always wrong, in whatever way is most convenient for men. In winter, you're the heater, nurse, cook, and prayer leader when the baby has a fever. In summer, you haul water, clean dung, and still have to look presentable for church, meaning brushing your hair with a wooden comb missing half its teeth. There are no days off, no holidays, no me time. Your only moment of peace is when the kids fall asleep and you get to patch pants. If your husband dies, you don't inherit the land. You might be kicked out, sent back to your parents, or worse, forced to marry his brother to preserve the bloodline. In some villages, there's a law. Misshaped bread is punishable. Once, your bread resembled an ear. You cried. Your mother-in-law said, "Don't waste tears. They're a luxury." And yet, through all this, women carry something miraculous: endurance. They build community. They share headache remedies made of mint and boiling water. They tell jokes over soup. They know which chicken laid the weird egg and why. You look at your mother, your sister, and you know, women don't just keep the hearth, they keep the entire village standing. No medals, no applause. But if they stopped for even one day, the whole system would fall apart. You sigh, wipe your face, then smile. This game may be brutal, but you're the only one who beats the final boss every single day. Think being an adult in the Middle Ages is hard? You're right. But being a child? Not harder. Just a different flavor of misery. Not the modern kind of suffering. Like, no tablet before bed. But the kind where you're foraging for potatoes at age 4, and possibly married off by 12. You're a kid in a medieval village. You wake up with the rooster. Not because you're an eager early riser, but because the rooster literally stepped on your face looking for grain. You crawl out of bed, rewrap the communal blanket that now has your brother's drool on it, and go looking for your mother. But she's already in the field. Your father is fixing a hoe. You're in charge of your 3-year-old sibling who screams louder than the church bell. Breakfast. A chunk of bread so hard it could be used in construction, and a spoonful of cold porridge scooped from yesterday's crusty leftovers. You gnaw on it like a rodent chewing tree roots, watching a trail of ants pass your feet and thinking, at least they have a plan. Your daily missions: herding ducks, collecting firewood, or making sure your sibling doesn't fall into the well. All three jobs are equally lethal. One time, you turned your back for a second, and the ducks led the whole flock into a neighbor's rice field. Result: 3 scoldings from mom and 7 years of hearing grandma retell the story at every family meal. School? That's for nobles. You learn by watching adults and doing what they do, or get whacked with a stick. The only alphabet you know is the chores chart. Morning, dish duty, noon, babysitting, afternoon, potato scavenging. Once you were assigned to watch the fire. You stood there, holding a wooden spoon like some apprentice wizard, stirring porridge. Then you burned the bottom of the pot. Your mom shouted like thunder. The entire village heard. From that day forward, your nickname was Saint Burnt Pot. Toys? Yes, if you count rocks, sticks, and a straw doll with 2 button eyes and 1 leg. One time you made a sword out of a reed. Your dad used it as a broom. Your feelings? Swept away with the dust. Medieval childhood didn't come with innocent joy. By 8, you're a low-res version of an adult. You know peers who've led oxen, carried water for a mile, or shaved their father's beard using a carrot peeler. Once, you had a fever. Your mom touched your forehead and said, "Doesn't feel too warm." 3 hours later, you were vomiting. "He's just growing," she said. Medical logic here is flexible at best. You stubbed your toe once. Your dad wrapped it in a rag and said, "I broke my arm once and still harvested wheat the next day." You wanted to protest, but then remembered how your sister said, "I don't want to get married," and grandma called her a Viking heathen. Kids don't ask questions. Don't speak loudly. Don't complain about being tired. Tiredness equals laziness. Laziness equals demonic possession. One time you nodded off in church. The priest tapped your shoulder and asked, "Are you meditating or sleep traveling?" You pretended to have a fever. Festivals are the only break you get. But even then, you're not allowed to dance. One time you tried and someone said, "Children who sway are touched by elves." You went home and cried into your armless straw doll. Kids confess too. You once admitted to stealing an onion. The priest made you fast for a day. You nearly died. Swore you'd never steal again, until the next onion appeared. Oaths are short-lived at your age. You dream of growing up. But then you see adults plowing fields, darning socks, and curing illness with boiled ginger and blind optimism. And suddenly, you just want to be a tree. And yet children still play, still laugh, still chase each other around trees, covered in mud and mystery worms, still whisper ghost stories in shaky voices and scream, "Boo!" under the moonlight. Still believe that if you shut your eyes tight enough, the world might fix itself. You, a medieval child, can't read, don't have toys, don't get a vote, but you know how to tie grass into rings, how to smell rain before it falls, and that when grandma calls your name, you run. Because being small doesn't mean you get a break. You thought that after everything, the muddy fields, the lumpy porridge, and chipping a tooth on medieval bread, you might find a little peace in the quiet corner of the village. But no, because you forgot one final powerful entity, the neighborhood. Medieval villages didn't have newspapers, no social media, definitely no TikTok. But that didn't stop information from spreading faster than the plague. And the primary source? Margaret, 55 years old, missing a front tooth, hair like a bird's nest, and a gossip algorithm so powerful it might as well be early generation AI. You sneeze? Margaret knows. You trip on a rock? Margaret narrates it like a serialized drama. You buy extra onions and forget to explain why? Word that you're pregnant reaches the priest before your own lungs can deny it. No cameras, no audio recordings, but villagers' eyes, sharper than hawks. They don't look at you, they scan, they don't listen, they harvest. Their memory? Impeccable. They remember the tear in your Easter dress from 3 years ago, They remember when your cow wandered into Mr. Moffat's yard back in 1318. Once, you overslept and missed morning mass. Harmless? Nope. The whole village concluded you'd abandoned the faith. One elder swore, "I saw her whispering to a cat during the full moon." And so you spent a week explaining you were just yelling at it for stealing your fish. Privacy? Doesn't exist. Your walls are made of mud and straw. They let sound pass through like air. An argument with your brother? Retold the next morning by the neighbor with more accuracy and flair than your original fight. Neighbors ask questions not to care, but to gather intel. Smelled something nice at your place yesterday, Who was eating at your house? Answer wrong, and the story becomes, they're feeding heretics in the woods. People don't need clocks. They track time by your footsteps. Walk fast, you're fleeing debt. Walk slow, you're definitely pregnant. Don't walk at all, they start preparing your funeral. One time you fell into the manure pit, normal accident. But 3 hours later, the entire village knew. With bonus details like, she was chasing chickens, a bad omen, or, it's because she skipped church yesterday. You became a living meme for 48 hours. Want to date someone? That's harder than getting a royal pardon. Every glance is monitored. Walk beside someone twice? You're engaged. Some poor souls just fetched water together and were married the next week because their eye contact was suspiciously long. Whenever someone yells at home, the whole neighborhood just happens to walk by. Some claim to be looking for their chickens. Others suddenly remember they need to return a pot. You open the door and find 12 people admiring your roof tiles. Festivals? Social info bombs. Every old story gets dug up. Who fell where? Who swore once? Who wore the same color as the widow? It's all discussed around the communal soup pot. You once got a haircut, a little shorter than usual. Within an hour, 3 ladies said you were copying city girls. One man muttered, "Witch hair." Very Norse. Your hair grew back faster than the rumors died down. Old Giles, 70, coughed 3 times during Mass. The next morning, villagers said he was cursed. He had to fast for 3 days, tape charms to his door. And now, every time he coughs, he yells, "Not magic." Even kids don't get a break. A crying child. Maybe someone stared at them while they slept. Not crying. Is it normal? There's always something to worry about. And yet, for all its horror, the village network is also how you survive. When you're sick, they bring porridge. When your cow disappears, they help you look. When you're accused of witchcraft, they at least bring smaller sticks. You learn to live under mouth surveillance. You learn to answer with riddles, smile at the right moment, and, when necessary, pretend you're mute. You don't control the narrative. You just try to be bland enough that the rumors stay edible. Your day ends with an old lady recounting the time her son was rumored to be in love with a cow. And you realize, here, living isn't just surviving, it's acting. On the world's smallest stage, in front of a jury that never sleeps. If you thought that behaving well, not coughing during a sermon, not staring at the neighbor's chicken too lovingly, and never gossiping, would save you from trouble, think again. In the Middle Ages, justice was a card game where you were always dealt the lose by default hand. Every village had something called a court of law, which sounds official, but in reality was just the corner of an old meeting hall with a wobbly table and 3 judges on stone stools. The village elder, half blind, the priest, fully judgmental, and the old woman with the best hearing in the county. The gavel, a stick of firewood. A typical case began when someone yelled, "Thief," usually over a missing chicken, or a missing pot, or missing trust. The village would gather like bees to honey, and the accused was dragged to the square, made to stand on a suspiciously round stone like a sacrificial lamb. You once witnessed such a case. Old Tib was accused of stealing apples from Maggie's tree. He denied it. She yelled louder. The village split into factions. "Give the apples back," versus "Let him live." Wooden spoons were nearly drawn. No evidence? No problem. There were always self-appointed witnesses. "I heard chewing behind the hedge," declared a blind woman. Her testimony? Fully accepted. Why? Faith matters more than sight. Verdicts were often based on community logic. Whoever cried louder or shouted more convincingly won. Sometimes the priest just flipped a coin. If it landed sans up, innocent. If the other side, what was that? Guilty. For serious accusations, like witchcraft, the court upgraded to full horror theater mode with trial by ordeal. Examples included water test, tossed into a pond, float equals witch, sink equals innocent and maybe dead. Hot iron test, carry a red-hot bar 3 steps. If your hand healed in 3 days, both innocent. If not, false, guilty and possibly infected. Faith test, place your hand on the Bible and swear. If your hand trembles, you're lying. Everyone's hand trembled. It was freezing. Your uncle was once accused of cursing in the market. He denied it. They made him bite the holy garlic. If he withstood the burn, pure soul. He coughed like a dragon and was sentenced to kneel in the village square for 3 days, chewing onions as penance. You heard of a girl who dreamt she could fly. By morning, she was questioned. With whom? To where? Who allowed this? She cried. They forgave her. But ever since, she's been guarded by 3 women whenever she sleeps. You were once sued because your chicken gave a dirty look to the neighbor's cat. You thought it was a joke. It wasn't. You had to parade the chicken to apologize. The cat said nothing. You were still warned for poor animal manners. Punishments? Wildly creative. Some were made to wear a pot on their head and walk the village for lying. Others had to carry pigs on their back for stealing cabbage. One guy had to dance in the square for claiming ghosts weren't real. There was also bake-it-out justice. 2 people argued? They had to bake bread together. If it burned, both were fined for lacking community spirit. If it turned out well, forgiveness all around. One such event ended in marriage. Reason. Their dough matched, so must their souls. You were nearly dragged to court for tilting your head too far to the left while walking. They thought you were cursing the village's right side. You had to publicly tilt your head to the right 12 times to rebalance the energy. No lawyers here. You defend yourself. If you speak well, you survive. If you stutter, you get labeled suspicious, shady, or suspiciously shady. You once saw an innocent man punished because he looked guilty. Meanwhile, a known thief was forgiven because he once gifted a chicken to the priest. Medieval justice wasn't blind. It saw, it judged, and it often sided with whoever brought the freshest bread. You learned a key lesson. In this village, justice is a spin of fate. Living rightly isn't enough. You have to live carefully, quietly, and in accordance with the local energy flow. You end your day warning your chicken not to stare at cats, telling your sibling not to dream of flying, and putting a coin in your pocket, just in case you need to request a private trial. After a full day of hoeing fields, shoveling dung, and dodging lawsuits because your chicken looked at a cat too seductively, you finally get a moment of peace. And you think, at least medieval entertainment must be kind of fun, right? The answer is yes, but only if you adjust your expectations. Medieval fun didn't involve Netflix, YouTube, or Saturday night karaoke. What you had instead were a stick, a plank, a handful of pebbles, and an imagination stronger than morphine. First up, throw the pebble at the thing. The thing might be a cracked pot, a leaky bucket, or a chicken with attitude. Highest score won. Nothing. Except the honor of being the best aim in the village. Kids played tag, but the playground was a field filled with cow dung. The game ended when someone fell in the mud, or got called home for their rat-chasing shift. Adults preferred story time. One person would start with, "Once my grandfather met a goblin," and everyone else added details. By the end, the goblin had become a princess, rode a whale, and baked excellent sourdough. If someone could play an instrument, usually a harp made from sheep guts and a window frame, the entire village would gather around, clapping and swatting mosquitoes in rhythm. Occasionally, there'd be a hit-the-barrel contest. A barrel dangled from a rope, filled with random contents, beans, dry bread, or a dead mouse. Winner kept the contents, and the responsibility, if it was the mouse. Another classic, Balance a water bucket on your head. First one to spill it got publicly laughed at, and remembered for 3 harvests. On special occasions, saint days, good harvests, weddings, villages threw dances. Translation: people banged pots, blew on flutes, and danced in circles. If you tripped, you had to get up and keep dancing, or risk being accused of demonic possession. Some people played pretend nobility. Everyone picked a prop, a bent spoon, a tattered cloak, and acted out roles. You once played the amnesiac count, speaking in a funny voice. Everyone loved it. Until you demanded a bread tax. You were sent home early. The older women gathered by the hearth, sewing and exchanging riddles. What hits without hurting, but everyone fears it? Answer: a mother-in-law's scolding. Raucous applause. One woman whispered, "So true." You once joined a village play called The Hunter and the Talking Fox. You played the bush. No lines, but you were proud. To this day, they still call you most expressive shrub. If someone could sing, even just one line, they were asked to repeat it until hoarse. At that point, they'd be given warm onion water, a very eye-opening prize. Evening entertainment? Watching the moon, telling ghost stories, counting stars. One person counted 237 stars, became the village astronomer. You made it to 11 and passed out, almost carried off by ants. Some villages had a reverse day. The poor acted as nobles. Elders pretended to be kids. But after 24 hours, roles reset. The poor stayed poor, the old got sore backs, but everyone laughed because you could yell at the priest without consequences. Some were village fools. They told stories, did impressions, danced around, no pay, but they got leftover cake. You once tried it, told a story about a talking spoon, and were mistaken for possessed. That ended your career. And then there was watching people nod off. During village meetings or church, anyone caught dozing was painted with charcoal. They only found out after looking in the well. This kept most people awake, except the priest. Medieval fun didn't need electricity or gadgets, just people, imagination, and a community always ready to laugh with you or at you. And on windy nights, with empty stomachs but laughter in the air, you realized joy isn't about what you have. It's about how creatively you play when there's nothing left to lose. After a long day of being a farmer, a silent background actor, and a temporary defendant in village court, you finally exhale. It's bedtime. That sacred moment modern folks call rest, but in medieval times it was better known as challenge night mode. Sleeping in the Middle Ages didn't mean flopping onto a memory foam mattress and dreaming of unicorns. First of all, there was no bed. You lay on straw, actual straw, mixed with some hay, a little dust, and with about a 70% chance, a few uninvited life forms. You shared this bed with your entire family. Mom, dad, little siblings, grandma, sometimes the dog, not for bonding, but for body heat. Every time someone rolled over, it became a silent negotiation. I nudge you slightly, and you don't boot me onto the floor. Your blanket? Technically a patchwork quilt. Realistically, some old shirts stitched to a potato sack. Weight, 4 kilograms. Warmth, subject to faith. Summer, you sweat. Winter, your breath freezes on your upper lip. The first night you don't itch all over? Congrats. You're too exhausted to feel anything. Lice, fleas, and straw bugs threw nightly feasts on your skin. You once woke up with something crawling across your face. You patted your cheek and thought, could be a friend. Sleep came in 2 shifts. You'd snooze early, wake in the dead of night, thanks to the cold, a rooster with no concept of time, or your father snoring like a war horn. You'd sit up, heat some water, say a prayer, or stare into the darkness contemplating why you exist. Then came second sleep. You didn't dream of princes or mermaids. You dreamed of porridge that wasn't burned, bread that didn't fall butter side down, and a day without washing feet in glacier runoff. Nightly rituals included blanket wrestling, where everyone vied for the least itchy corner. You once woke up on the dirt floor, ejected by your sibling's foot. You crawled back, only to find Grandma's elbow had claimed all blanket rights. Sounds of the night? Far from silent. Wind whistling through cracks, owls screeching, mice scurrying, babies crying, your stomach growling in harmony with the neighbor's cough, a symphony of suffering if you listened closely. Scents. Diverse. Foot funk, half-burned wood, forgotten stew, damp clothes, and the raw aroma of human existence. If it rained, the roof would drip directly onto your face. You placed a bowl to catch it. Come morning, you had free facial wash. Eco-friendly, unsolicited. Sometimes you dreamt well, flying over wheat fields, eating soup with actual meat, or simply sitting alone with no one shouting your name. Then you'd wake to someone's leg across your nose. You tried making a pillow by stuffing straw into cloth. Night 1, it felt like rocks. By night 3, you ditched the pillow and used your coat. By night 5, you slept flat, like your dreams. Once, your father warned, field inspection tomorrow. You worried so much you dreamed of getting arrested for planting seeds too close together. You woke in a cold sweat. Grandma patted you and said, "I once dreamed I got sued by a chicken." Comforting. Someone dreamed of fairies. The next morning, the priest demanded details. Were they clothed? A little. Verdict. Lustful dreams. Punishment. 3 days without meat. Not that anyone had any. You snored once so loudly they tied a bell to your wrist to check for sleepwalking. That night, you didn't dare roll over. Still, the bell rang. The cat slept on your arm. And so, in your shared bed, surrounded by snores, smells, and low-grade starvation, you closed your eyes and drifted off. Not because it was cozy, but because you were beyond exhausted. Sleep in the Middle Ages wasn't a sweet escape. It was the final task of the day. You completed it however you could. And if you woke up without a cold, without being kicked, and without a chicken pecking your face, you called it a successful night. You used to think sleep was the hardest part of medieval life, until you woke up and took a deep breath. Big mistake. Because what you inhaled was not fresh morning air, but a full-scale olfactory symphony, so pungent that even modern public toilets would bow in admiration. You open your door to greet the day. Does the air smell clean? Absolutely not. It greets you with damp ash, wet hay, fresh cow manure, and something decomposing in the corner of the shed that may or may not have once been a turnip, or a squirrel. You wash your face with water from a bucket that's been sitting out all night. It smells like iron, moss, and the ghost of centuries past. You rinse your mouth with salt, not by choice, but because the water's too dirty to swallow. Just one sip feels like drinking the tears of a depressed rock. Your clothes? The same as yesterday, and the day before, and last week. You once washed them with fireplace ash and urine, the go-to method when no one can afford soap. Results: possibly bacteria-free, but certainly not fragrant. As for body odor, inescapable. People didn't bathe daily, or weekly. Some only bathed this season to prepare for next season's feast. The mix of sweat, dead skin, soil, and pig fat, rubbed on the body to stay warm, created a unique cologne, medieval no. Panchwan. You recall the village uncle who proudly hadn't bathed since his cow was alive. He'd declare, "A man's scent is his character." And based on that, his personality had several conflicting layers. The market was the epicenter of smells: dried fish, hanging meat, burned bread, raw cheese, and mysterious dishes that should have been buried yesterday. People crowded together, breathing on one another, and no one flinched. Not because they didn't notice, but because they had evolved beyond noticing. One time, you caught a weird scent, sweet, sharp, and suspicious. Turned out the neighbor had tried adding dried herbs to his clothes for a noble aroma. The whole village thought his house was on fire. The church didn't offer much relief. The smell of melting candles, tightly packed worshippers, musty robes, and holy water, reused for far too long. You once kissed the crucifix and noticed it tasted oddly salty. Your bedroom? More like a designated sleeping zone. No doors. You slept beside livestock, under drying fish, and next to someone who just ate raw onions. Every breath was an act of bravery. When you were sick, someone rubbed you with healing balm, herbs soaked for weeks in vinegar. The scent was a medley of wet soil and expired mustard. Even when you recovered, the smell lingered. On your skin, in your hair, in your soul. You once helped your mother make perfume, boiled dry flowers in vinegar. The resulting liquid could repel lice and guests. Legend had it that anyone who didn't smell was suspicious. He must be a sorcerer. No scent of life. One man bathed and was immediately accused of witchcraft. His defense? I just had a wash. No one believed him. People shoved mint leaves into shoes, wore hats made of sage, and dangled garlic necklaces to mask themselves. You tried the garlic necklace once. Dogs chased you, cats avoided you, and Grandma asked if you were doing witchcraft. Think medieval stench was a problem? It was culture, a lifestyle, a way to recognize each other in the dark. You could walk into a room blindfolded and declare, "Ah, Uncle George is here," and be correct. You once dreamed of a clean beach, soft wind, and ocean salt in the air, then woke up to find your pillow soaked, because your younger sibling had wet the bed. Ocean breeze, cancelled. And yet, you adapted. Smell stopped being the enemy. It became your companion. A reminder you were alive, breathing, and still strong enough to laugh, even if every inhale was a medieval gamble. You sat down, exhaled, and amidst the swirling notes of the 14th century, you smiled. At least I haven't smelled despair. You think you understand medieval laws? Sorry, you forgot the most important one: folk magic. In this era, science hadn't been invented. Anything unexplainable was blamed on witches, evil spirits, or God testing your moral fiber. One time, you had a stomachache after eating bean porridge. The neighbor said, "Ah, the moonlight must have pierced your belly." No further questions. You were taken to the old elm at the edge of the village, where a granny blew into your navel and chanted something nasal. That was it. No medicine, no explanation. If you got better, it was the spell. If not, you just didn't believe hard enough. Superstition ran deep. You tripped after crossing paths with a black cat? Clearly, the cat was an agent of darkness. No one asked, "Were your shoes wet?" Just, "Did it look at you?" You coughed during Mass? Might have been the cold wind. But to the villagers, it meant you were possessed. The priest would rush over, pat your back, anoint your forehead, and whisper, "What is your name?" In the spirit realm, red-haired women were automatically suspicious. Left-handed people were forced to use their right, because the left is the devil's hand. One boy wore gloves for a month to correct his inherited sin. You once saw a granny draw a circle of flour around the fireplace to protect the fire spirit. You tried it. Your mom shouted, "Wasting food." The devil's not here yet, but hunger is. If someone fell ill mysteriously, caught bad wind, remedy: slap them with mugwort or stuff garlic into their pillow. The smellier, the stronger. You once slept on such a pillow, dreamt only of onions, no garlic in sight. Nighttime was prime ghost hours. You weren't allowed to whistle after sunset, look in a mirror past midnight, or, most importantly, finish the rice pot. That last bit is reserved for the spirits. You were once thrown out of the kitchen for picking up dropped bread. Grandma snapped, "That was left by the dead, for luck." Ever since, you've avoided all food that hits the ground. Witches were the ultimate fear, and it didn't take much to be labeled one. A weird mole? Suspicious. Talking in your sleep. Dangerous. Owning a black cat? Confirmed. Laughing alone in the woods? Arrested. There was a girl in your village who knew how to mix herbs for coughs. Everyone called her a miracle worker, until the village chief's son drank her tea and didn't get better. The next day she was tied up in the town square and interrogated. Where did you learn your magic? You once witnessed a witch trial. The accused was tied with stones and thrown into a pond. If she floated, witch. If she sank, innocent, but very dead. The crowd clapped when she sank fast. See? A righteous soul. You wondered, why not try rope first? You were once suspected of having spiritual sight, because you predicted rain. Your secret? Frogs croaking. But when you said that, villagers gasped. Frogs only sing when the spirit gate opens. You were told not to speak again if you didn't want to lose your third soul. Superstition even affected farming. You weren't supposed to sow on a crescent moon, or the plants would feel sad. You once planted during rain, and the crops thrived. Your neighbor said, "You've made a pact with the sky." You nodded and kept fertilizing. There was a festival called Ghost Sweeping Day. The whole village banged pots, screamed, and waved brooms. You joined until you were punished for shouting the wrong chant. It's cleanse the darkness, not I'm very angry. Still, superstition had its perks. It united people. If something weird happened, the whole village would gather to burn herbs, draw sigils, and chant. You were once touched seeing everyone come together to bury a chicken that died mysteriously. You learned to live with the unexplainable. And when you saw someone wearing a banana leaf hat, shouting into a well under a full moon, you didn't ask. You just bowed slightly and murmured, "Peace be upon you." Because here, survival wasn't just about hunger. It was about dodging spiritual suspicion, which could turn you from that quiet guy into the whisper around the cauldron after just one poorly timed sneeze. You've survived 18 days in the Middle Ages. Congratulations, you've outlasted more people than most. But don't celebrate with bread, you still don't have any. Because the next thing on your mind should be the one nobody wants to talk about. Death. Today, people fear death from accidents, cancer, or the dreaded air conditioner flu. In the Middle Ages, you could die from literally anything. Falling into a well, getting pecked by a chicken, eating the wrong mushroom, drinking water at the wrong hour. Someone once died from dancing too hard and tripping on their skirt. You've heard whispers of the Great Plague. What villagers feared most, the Black Death. One person gets a fever, swollen lumps, a cough, and within days, their house becomes permanently quiet. Survivors burn their clothes, their furniture, sometimes the entire house. Anyone coughing too much was tied to a pole and quarantined with rope. Medieval social distancing. You remember your uncle's leg swelling. Nothing serious at first, but after 2 days, it turned purple. People said, "A curse has taken root." On day 3, he disappeared. Official story. He went to get help. Reality? Quietly buried behind the pig pen in a low contagion ceremony. Child mortality? Brutal. A kid coughs today. Might not make it to next week. You once played with the girl next door. The next day, her mom went to the market without her. You asked. She replied, "She's with the angels now." You nodded. Didn't ask again. People died from leftover porridge, from drinking mushroom wine, from kissing someone with a fever. Nobody really knew why, just God called. And often, God called in bulk. Getting injured was a death risk. Cut your hand? Get infected. Break a bone? Live crooked. One guy fell off his roof fixing tiles. Landed in hay. Survived. But the next day, woke up with a headache. And 3 days later, never woke again. You once got a fever. Mom laid herbs on your chest. The healer bled your arm. Grandma lit a candle. You lived. People said you had a strong spirit. You think it was rest, fluids, and not being slapped too hard. Some people died from spoiled cheese, others from cow kicks. One guy choked on his own joke while laughing too hard. In the Middle Ages, death didn't need a reason. It just showed up. Funerals? Simple. Wrap the body in coarse cloth, bury it in the ground. Not too deep, digging is hard. Some villages had no cemetery, only a remembrance corner. You'd walk by a sign. Here once lay Bartholomew. You once attended a funeral where people cried and harvested grain at the same time. Life didn't stop. The dead were mourned. The living were still hungry. Villagers believed the soul lingered for 3 days. Those 3 days were sacred. No bad-mouthing. No cats jumping on the grave. No child mimicking the dead's voice. Once happened. They fed the kid garlic for a week. People feared death deeply. They wore talismans, slept with charms under pillows, sprinkled salt at doorways. You once did that and slipped. Mom said, "See? Karma strikes instantly. An old man once told you, if you live to 40, you're a legend. You were 17. That hit hard. He coughed right after and said nothing more. Death wasn't far. It was your neighbor. The wind, the rooster crowing at the wrong time. It could come whenever. No RSVP. But oddly enough, medieval folk weren't as afraid of death as you'd think. They lived each day like it was their last, not out of optimism, but because it probably was. They laughed, worked, broke bread, and hoped God wasn't making roll call that day. You lay down, thinking of all the deaths you've witnessed. But you're still breathing, still hear the wind, still feel a cat licking your face, and you whisper, "Today, I won." After nearly dying from suspicious porridge, a badly timed cough, and a cat's gaze that was far too deep, you sigh in relief. You're still alive. But then your grandmother says, "You're almost marriage age." You freeze. Marriage? Who? Why? I'm only 14. In the Middle Ages, love wasn't about hearts pounding beneath the moonlight. It was a financial strategy, a land negotiation, and sometimes a peace treaty between two families, still arguing over a goat theft 3 generations ago. You didn't choose your partner. Your father chose. Your grandmother had opinions. The whole village contributed. You were the only one not consulted. You remember a girl who cried because she bumped into her ex one day, and was married off to his brother the next. Her mother said, "At least it stays in the family." There were no dates. You might see each other once. Maybe make fleeting eye contact at church. Sometimes you'd just hear things like, "He's got 3 whole teeth and only snores when lying on his left side." You ask, "Anything else?" "Well, he has a cow." Marriage was a contract. No love, no trial period, no "let's see if we click." You agreed by nodding in front of the priest. That was the paperwork. Weddings? There was dry bread, watered-down ale, people dancing in circles, and someone always drunk enough to fall in a well. The bride wore a flower wreath. The groom borrowed a coat from his cousin. And after the vows? Back to farming. The wedding night had no candles, no romantic music, just a straw bed and deeply confused glances. In some villages, there was a witness ritual. A few people stood outside the room listening for sounds of validation. One couple made no noise, and were asked to do it again the next day. Romance after marriage? Maybe. Maybe not. Couples lived like co-workers sharing a bunk. Husband plowed, wife patched. They mostly spoke when deciding who would pay the next tax. Love was shown through small gestures. Sharing the warm spot by the fire. Offering the last bit of cheese. Carrying your bucket of water. No one said, "I love you." They said, "I wouldn't trade you for 2 sheep." Medieval poetry, right there. Cheating? Big crime. Public punishment? One guy had ash smeared on his face and had to walk around the village singing "Love Gone Wrong." Another had to fetch water for everyone in town for a week. People didn't shame you with words. They just used you relentlessly. Widows were often forced to remarry, not for joy, but because someone needed to do the chores. You saw a 60-year-old lady married to a 70-year-old man because both families needed help harvesting. They barely spoke, but harvested 12 sacks of grain that season. Divorce? Rare. Almost non-existent, unless someone died. That was considered legal release. A wife once left her husband and was accused of witchcraft. A husband left his wife, and people said, he must have a reason. Pre-marriage love? Highly discouraged. Secret meetings behind the church. Onions instead of flowers. You saw a couple hold hands once. The next morning, the rumor reached the priest. They were called in. How long did you look into each other's eyes? There was one famous village love story. A girl loved the blacksmith but was married off to the landlord's son. She and the blacksmith tried to elope, got lost, chased by dogs, came back, were grounded, and eventually got married anyway. Because fate said no, but they argued back. Ideal partner checklist: owns a cow, can sing, even one song. Hasn't been sued recently. Most importantly, not rumored to be cursed. You looked around and saw couples growing old together. arguing about turnips but still holding hands in muddy fields. You realized medieval love wasn't about roses or love letters. It was surviving winter without strangling each other. You sighed and headed home, preparing for tomorrow's fieldwork. People whispered that you were about to be picked. You gave a soft smile, the kind that says, "Yes, life is beautiful," and muttered, "As long as he doesn't snore in rhythm with the drums." You once thought, well, if I had to be born in the Middle Ages, being a peasant is awful. Maybe being a noble would be better. Oh, it sounds nicer. But then you discover, being a noble is just a harder game mode where you wear velvet and die of gout instead of foot rot. As a noble, you wake up in a carved oak bed with a straw mattress stuffed with goose feathers, itchy like sleeping on a nest of lazy ants. You've got linen curtains to block the draft, which means it blocks about 15% of the wind. The rest breezes straight into your armpits. You don't cook. Fantastic. But you also don't choose your meals. Breakfast is pale bread, half-baked, cheese hard enough to chip teeth, and salted meat from last month. After chewing, you need a break to recover jaw strength. You have servants. Even better. Except they sleep by the stables, haven't bathed in 3 weeks, and frequently ask, "Would my lord like some horse oil in his hair for shine?" You think, shiny yes, but scented like regret. Being a noble doesn't mean leisure. You manage land, listen to peasants weep, resolve cases like, "Your chicken attacked my cat," and sign tax forms for the king, meaning you hand over 80% of your harvest in exchange for permission to continue existing. You once sat in a high-backed chair, eating with a silver spoon, when a fellow noble choked on a fishbone. No one helped. Touching someone mid-meal was a breach of decorum. He tried washing it down with ale. Result, the bone lodged deeper. He survived, but now speaks like a sparrow. You wear fine clothes, hand-woven fabrics, embroidered tunics, jeweled chains. But every outfit takes 30 minutes to put on, and once dressed, you can't move freely, not because of fashion rules, but because the outfit is heavier than a ship's net. You can't marry for love. Marriage is diplomacy. You once fancied a maid. She was sent to a convent the next morning. You married a duchess from another land, whom you'd never met, but were told had a noble beard inherited from her father. You're educated. You read Latin, sign your name correctly, and can listen to someone explain Aristotle without falling asleep, for at least the first 15 minutes. But books cost as much as cows, and sometimes, mice eat the ending. Noble pastimes include hunting, horseback riding, and playing instruments. But going to the forest requires 5 attendants. 1 to scare game, 1 to hold your chair, 1 to keep your cloak out of the mud. By the time you're home, you feel like you were hunted. You tried learning music. But gut-stringed lutes are expensive. The strings snap easily, and one time you hit the wrong chord. Your mother said you offended the eardrums of the in-laws. You switched to drumming, until neighbors petitioned you for smiting the Lord's rhythm. Noble women had it worse. Corsets by day, backaches by night. Every feast was a contest of who can sit still the longest without scratching. One lady got a rash from her flax underskirt but could only itch with her eyes. There are endless ceremonies. From morning to night, hand-washing rites, sitting rites, nail-trimming rituals, blessings for not choking on soup. You once forgot to bow before a statue and were punished with 4 hours of reflective standing in a corner. Danger lurks. You could be poisoned by family, servants, or someone whose shoes you stepped on at last year's banquet. You heard of a nobleman whose wine was spiked. He survived, but lost his sense of taste. Now he eats gruel and reminisces about flavor. You live in a castle. Great, except it's freezing all year. The roof leaks, rats throw parties, and the toilet is a hole dropping into the unknown. Every bathroom trip echoes back, directly into your noble ego. You've got land, titles, respect, but you don't have freedom. No roaming where you wish, no laughing too loud, unseemly. You've practiced nasal chuckling to stay dignified. And at night, lying on your herb-scented pillow, wearing silver rings, beneath a flower-stitched canopy, you don't sleep. Because tomorrow, more ceremonies, more banquets, more legal disputes, more ancestral gatherings. And because you're still thinking about that maid, and her simple cotton dress, Being a noble isn't the same pain as a peasant's, but it isn't much freer. You live like a painting, elegant, revered, and nailed to the wall. You think modern police are strict? Caution. You've clearly never lived under medieval law. Justice here has no cameras, no lawyers, no appeals. Only sticks, rope, and the suspicious glares of a community with the memory of a prehistoric lizard. You didn't need to commit murder or rob a bank to be considered a criminal. You could be guilty for stealing bread, bad-mouthing the priest, laughing at the wrong time during Mass, letting your goat wander into someone else's garden, or daring to call autumn melancholy. One man was punished for sneezing on the village elder's face. You once witnessed a trial titled "Bread So Hard It Cracked Grandma's Tooth." Defendant, the village baker. Charge, intent to injure the elderly. Sentence, carry water for grandma for 3 days, offering a new creative apology with each delivery. Most common punishment? Being tied to the market square's wooden post. You'd stand there, hands bound, lips shut, while villagers passed by, throwing judgmental stares, sometimes rotten vegetables. Occasionally, a muttered, "Poor thing, but also kind of deserved it." More severe? The pillory. A wooden frame clamping your head and arms. It was painful, itchy, and humiliating. One man was pilloried for missinging a hymn. He accidentally swapped God the Merciful with God the Abandoning. 2 days in stocks. 3 weeks of being called the blasphemous bard. Bigger theft, lose a hand, caught lying, head shaved, arguing with the priest, kneel on raw beans. One offender was made to drink garlic oil mixed with fireplace ash for spreading toxic lies. Everyone was horrified. Everyone who drank it lost a friend or two. Worst crime? Heresy. Saying something that contradicted church teachings. You once heard a guy suggest, maybe the moon is just a rock. The next day, they tested his spiritual purity by making him sniff the priest's tunic, unwashed for 3 days. No one ever challenged theology again. Witchcraft was terrifying. No evidence needed. If your hen laid a double-yolked egg or your hearth was too warm, you were a suspect. You were once accused of weather-sensing sorcery and forced to sit in the town square and recite all your forecasting methods. The poor were punished harder than the rich. A noble who stole sacramental wine? A stern warning. A farmer who stole a potato? Forced to crawl around the village baaing like a goat to learn shame. There were penance rites. Want to avoid punishment? Sure, if you donated a sheep, a stack of firewood, or wrote a flattering poem about the priest, you once tried that. Your rhyme was off. Your sentence was extended for offending sacred literature. Some punishments were absurd. One involved walking backwards during a church procession. Every passerby had to either spit, politely, or mutter "shame on you." You then had to clean up all the spit. You once saw a man publicly scolded for swearing. He was made to sing a medley about kindness, with interpretive dance. Every wrong move meant starting over. They say he stayed quiet for the next 3 harvests. The saddest punishment wasn't physical. It was exile. Being cast out meant no land, no name. You knew an old woman falsely accused of stealing onions. Her dog had taken them. She was banished, carrying nothing but a sack with 1 spoon. But not all punishments were cruel. Some were redemptive. Carrying water, cleaning stables, helping with barn repairs. A young man once dropped the community soup pot. After 3 months digging a new village well, he was pardoned and promoted to assistant kitchen overseer. You realize justice here isn't about fairness, it's about stability. As long as people feel order is maintained, justice is considered successful, even if it's enforced with stocks, sermons, or a beetroot. You head home, fold your hands, and whisper a prayer. Please don't let me accidentally insult anyone, especially the mayor's cat. Because here, crime is sometimes just not understanding the rules. And punishment is the village's way of reminding you that surviving doesn't mean misbehaving. After witnessing every kind of punishment from public flagpole impersonator to redemption by loud singing, you start to realize something. In the Middle Ages, law was just the tip of the iceberg. The real force beneath? Religion. And faith, or at least the performance of faith, was not optional. It was survival. You wake up early. Not because you want to, but because the church bell rings, like the wall. Apocalypse just clocked in for work. You throw on your sandals, wrap your cloak, pull on your hat, and drag yourself to the only place that can save you from both mortal sin and breathing incorrectly. The church. Religion wasn't just God and the Bible. It was your calendar. It decided what you could eat, when you could marry, when to plant seeds, and even what days you were allowed to be cheerful. You were once scolded for laughing loudly during Lent. Apparently, you were making the demons rejoice. The holy calendar was more crowded than a modern CEO's schedule. Easter, Ascension, Virgin Mary Day, St. What's-His-Name Day, and thank God the rain wasn't that bad day. You once attended 4 services in 3 days and couldn't remember which saint you were even celebrating anymore. The village priest was the most powerful person around, just after the weather. He held the keys to heaven, the authority to forgive sins, and the right to ignore questions like, why did the crops fail this year? You once asked that. He said, pray harder. You were expected at Mass at least once a week. Miss one, and your name went into the book of suspicion. You once had a slight fever and couldn't attend. The next morning, someone asked, what were you dreaming about last night that kept you from church? The core tenet was simply, believe. Understanding wasn't required. You couldn't read the Bible anyway. It was in Latin. But you nodded when the priest preached. Anyone who asked, but why, got sent for faith retraining. You remember someone once questioned, if God is almighty, why do the harvests keep failing? Before an answer came, he was temporarily relocated to a monastery. When he returned, he just said, God has his reasons. No one asked again. Faith came with rituals. You washed your hands in a certain direction. You knelt in sync with the bell. You fasted for 40 days with no meat, except fish, because fish was technically swimming vegetables. You once ate a sausage during Lent by accident, had to confess and eat plain porridge for 5 days as penance. Religion even monitored your dreams, dreaming of angels, good omen, dreaming of fire, spiritual trial, dreaming of a monk doing the cha-cha. Nobody dared to interpret that one. You once went to confession. Dim light, wooden booth, priest's voice echoing like it came from beneath the earth. What sin have you committed? You trembled and confessed to swearing after stepping on a thorn. Silence. Then forgiveness. Plus, a prayer longer than the time your foot hurt. Curses, miracles, strange phenomena, all linked to the divine. One man collapsed and babbled nonsense. People said it was the language of angels. They called the priest to interpret. Turns out, he swallowed a fly. Miracles? Oh yes. There was a well that never dried up, thanks to tree roots underground. But the villagers believed it was the Holy's tears. Anyone using it had to pray 3 times, bow 6, and never take the water home, because removing the sacred is an insult. You once saw an exorcism festival. The whole village gathered, burned herbs, sang, Lord, take my hand. The lead singer got the lyrics wrong and fainted from anxiety. People whispered, the devil did it. Real reason? Skipped breakfast. Religion controlled behavior too. No romance on Fridays. It was a sorrowful day for the Lord. No exclamations like, oh my God, not even oh my dirt. Someone once said that and got asked, who are you calling on exactly? You once gave the priest a particularly large potato. He smiled and blessed your harvest. That night, light rain fell and your crops flourished. Was it a miracle? Maybe. Or just excellent potato timing. Faith gave you comfort. Harsh as it was the only thing telling you. This means something. Even if you were hungry today, you might be fed tomorrow. Even if you fell in the well today, you might be saved tomorrow. If you prayed correctly. You're not sure you believe all of it, but you still kneel, still recite, still sing. Because here, faith doesn't just redeem, it protects. Have you ever set your alarm for 6:30 a.m., hit snooze 3 times, then finally got up at 7:15 in quiet despair? In the Middle Ages, there was no snooze button. In fact, there was no clock at all. Time was measured by anything that made noise, shined light, or got wet at just the right moment. You woke up to the sound of roosters. The problem was, roosters didn't sync their circadian rhythm with yours. Some days, they crowed at 3 a.m. Other days, 6 a.m. came and they were mute as stone. Once, you thought you'd overslept because the rooster was silent. Turns out it had a sore throat. You still got scolded. You measured work time by tree shadows. If the shadow tilted 30 degrees, it was mid-morning. If it was short and the sun harsh, noon. If it stretched like a medieval drama series, it was near evening. Once, you got fooled by a bare branch tree and thought it was noon. But it was only 8 a.m. Calendars? Sure. But no one hung one on a wall. People used mouth calendars like 3 days after St. John's feast, it's time to plant beans. Or, when old Giles coughs 3 times, winter begins. Days of the week didn't matter as much as religious days. You didn't know it was Wednesday. You knew it was light fasting day, meaning no meat, unless for religious, medical, or we have too many old chickens reasons. You once tracked the calendar by counting religious cakes. If there were 3 left, it meant 3 days until the big feast. One time your little sibling ate one, and you thought it was feast day, dressed up, went to church, and everyone asked, "Why are you here so early?" Cooking time? Measured by prayers. Add salt after 1 Lord's Prayer. Flip the bread after 3 Hail Marys. You once prayed too fast. The bread burned. Since then, you chant like you're sending someone off to the afterlife. Nobody wore a watch. Some wore onions to repel mosquitoes. But timekeeping? Nope. You once asked your grandma, "What time is it?" She replied, "Dew's still fresh equals not noon." Then looked at the sky and added, "Clouds like that equals rain by afternoon." One man in your village was famous for being accurate with time. He'd look at the sun, glance at a shadow, and announce, "It's the 6th hour." No one checked, but everyone nodded. He once predicted a good harvest, though the crops later got eaten by bugs. You once tried timing your sleep by your father's snoring. 1 snore cycle equals about 17 minutes. You slept through 3 cycles. The rooster crowed. You went to work with dark circles under your eyes. Your grandma said you looked like a warrior from the old days. Sometimes time was measured by smells. Smell of cooking equals morning. Smell of cow dung equals midday, sun's out. Strong smell of dried fish equals afternoon. Smell of burning equals too late. Run check the pot. You remember being asked, "How long until the wedding starts?" You said, "About 3 gusts of wind." Everyone understood. And yes, after the 3rd gust, the ceremony began. Who needs clocks when you've got your nose and faith? You were once punished for being late for sacred time. Arriving 3 prayers late to service, the priest looked at you like you'd flipped the cosmos. You apologized and were assigned candle-blowing duties for the rest of Lent. When seasons changed, you felt it with your face. Spring, gentle breeze. Summer, hot slap. Fall, leaves scratching. Winter, wind hitting you like mom's scolding hand. You didn't need a calendar. You needed cheek sensitivity. Some used wax candles to track time. 1 burn segment equals time to check the stew. But wind blew the candle out, the cat knocked it over, or your sibling ate the wax thinking it was candy. You abandoned that method after nearly feeding everyone raw rice. Seasonal timing came through sayings. If swallows fly low, rain's coming. If radishes lean left equals late season. If rice blooms on the full moon, lucky yield. You listened, memorized, and hoped your memory was better than a sick rooster's. And so, you lived each day not by numbers, but by signs. Not by hours, but by light. Not by minutes, but by the crowing of a rooster, the ringing of a bell, and the rumble of your stomach right on cue. You looked at the slanting sun. Time to roast the roots. You felt the mist falling. Tonight'll be chilly. You didn't need a clock, because here, time was felt. And even if you didn't know what hour it was, you knew, deep down. it was time to go home. Did you think the worst job in the Middle Ages was being a peasant? You'd be right, if you forgot about all the other jobs that were even more bizarre, more questionable, and sometimes life-threatening. All for a few coins made of green-tinted copper. You've probably heard of the night soil man. Sounds poetic. It's not. The job? Collecting human waste from public, or very private, latrines to sell as fertilizer. Every morning, a front row seat to the scent of civilization. And the earlier you worked, the better. Less judgmental stares from neighbors. There was also the meat turner. Not a chef. Just someone who stood next to a fire for hours, rotating a pig or chicken to cook evenly. Heat, soul roasting, grease, forever embedded in your hair. Pay, licking the plate. Last. You once met the royal wine taster. Sounds fancy? Actually, he drank the wine before nobles did, to check for poison. He survived 9 years, then retired when he lost all taste. Every wine now tastes like boiled leaf water, he sighed. The town crier was another classic. Since nobody could read, your job was to walk from street to street shouting things like, "The Lord will eat cake on Friday," or "Grain tax goes up if the chickens keep fighting." If you got the message wrong, punished. If you shouted too loud, forced to study music. There was also the tooth collector. When someone died and wasn't buried too deeply, you could sneak in and harvest teeth to sell to button makers, bead stringers, or hairpin crafters. Danger, getting caught. Reward, that sweet, sweet calcium. You may have heard of the royal cat companion. Brushing fur, scooping poop, serving meals, in silence. Because the cat hated noise. Payment? 1 bowl of oats and the disdainful glances of your entire village. Then there was the smoke maker. Not a chef, just someone hired to burn herbs or damp straw to create fog for village plays, keep bugs away, or cleanse the air of sin. One time, the wind changed direction, and the entire town thought there was a fire. Chaos, buckets, screaming. You tried torchbearer once, during a festival. You had to hold a flaming oil lamp in the wind for hours. You lost 3 fingertips to mild burns. Your reward? A round of applause and a half-eaten biscuit. Some jobs were nightmares from the title alone. Grave watcher, to check who might not be fully dead. Corpse sack stitcher. Goose wrangler for holiday mass. Geese are unholy by nature. There was even a mud tester. When it rained, they walked ahead of nobles to test how deep the mud was. Every fall was considered dedication. One elderly man did this job for 20 years. His legs bent like parentheses. Locals called him the human spirit level. You tried holy echo. Your job? Correct the priest during scripture, but quietly. No louder than the priest. You had to cough politely, nod, blink at the right moment. Fail, and people whispered that you were opposing divine order. Another role, well watcher. Your job? Guard the village well. Nothing weird goes in. One day a child threw an onion in. The watcher instantly called a town meeting because the sacred source has been sullied. Night guard? Not easy. No lights, no clocks. You had to count footsteps, listen for owls, and pretend to be a ghost so thieves would run. One night you shouted, "I am an angry spirit," and got hit with a sandal by your dad for ruining his sleep. And then, oral map maker. You wandered the village, asking locals about paths, turns, trees. You stitched together their memories into a map. Not always accurate, but if it looked nice, it was official. One time, you placed Grandma's house in the middle of the lake. She stared at the drawing and said, "Maybe I lived underwater and forgot." And so you realized, whether noble or nobody, everyone had a job. And most were weird enough to make a modern HR department cry. But they did them. They lived. They laughed when paid in turnips, and kept laughing when those turnips were stolen. You sighed and looked out over the village path, where the meat turner had just slipped face first into a half-cooked pig. And you whispered, "At least, I'm not the guy who used to trim horse nose hairs anymore." Have you ever complained about a delayed flight, a missed bus, or rush hour traffic? In the Middle Ages, just leaving your village meant your chances of returning in one piece were about as good as winning a lottery, in a world where lotteries didn't even exist. Travel wasn't for relaxation. It was a mission. You went because the king summoned you, because your new spouse lived in the next village, aka the fancier stable. Or because your village ran out of turnips and someone had to go hunt down a beet somewhere else. Transport? Your feet. That's it. If you were lucky, you had a donkey. If you were extremely lucky, a cart pulled by oxen. But oxen only moved if they wanted to, and they didn't care about your travel plans. No GPS, just stubborn hooves and occasional flatulence. The roads? Forget it. Thick mud, sharp rocks, surprise rain, and wind slapping your face like Mother Nature's disappointed hand. A 5-mile journey could take a whole day. Not because of the distance, because every 3 steps you had to stop and yank stones from your sandals. You once traveled from your village to the next one, just 3 miles away. Along the way, you were startled by an owl, nearly tripped over a field mouse, and accidentally wandered into a cabbage patch. They found you 6 hours later, hugging a cabbage stalk and whispering, "I heard the rooster calling." Maps. What maps? Directions were given through trees, rocks, and sheer guesswork. Walk until you see the lightning-split oak, then turn right at the manure pile. If you hear the stream singing, you're close. You followed the stream's windy whistle, turned left, found a graveyard. Overnight stay? Forget inns. You crashed in barns, under bridges, or if you were really lucky, in someone's warm kitchen corner. One time you slept on a hay pile. Woke up sharing your dreams with 3 toads and a nearsighted ferret. Food? You packed stale bread and cheese that had turned a color not recognized by nature. You thought of tossing it, but Grandma said, "Sour means flavor." You ate it. She was right. It had flavor. The flavor of regret. You once met pilgrims walking hundreds of miles to sacred monasteries, hoping to be healed or forgiven. They carried holy relics, blessed water, and permanent back pain. Dangers? Endless. Bandits, wolves, bandit wolves, hailstorms, strange illnesses, general confusion. One guy left to propose marriage, disappeared. Came back 3 years later married to his ex's sister. It wasn't planned. Just no Facebook in those days. You heard of a man who left to sell salt, got lost, became a traveling bard. Came back 5 years later. No one recognized him. He had to play an old tune from the village market to prove he was himself. Sometimes you needed a travel pass. Without it, strangers were suspect, interrogated, and sometimes pelted with tomatoes, if it was tomato season. You once faked an accent to blend in. Got caught when you mispronounced turnip. You couldn't travel alone. You needed a group. The more people, the fewer the bandits. Or at least more people to split your stuff after the bandits. You joined a group of 4, came back with 3. One joined a monastery mid-trip because the soup was better. When you returned, you became the local storyteller. People gathered to hear about trees taller than houses, fish that did flips, and an old lady selling onions who sang lullabies. Once your story was too detailed. They accused you of witchcraft. No one survives that much adventure, they said. You learn to read nature. Moss, just north. Scented wind equals nearby village. Barking dog, shus, someone's near. Or you passed a kennel, and if everything suddenly goes silent, drop. Pretend you're a shrub. You came home with torn clothes, blistered feet, and a soul full of chaos. Grandma asked, "Bring anything back?" You handed her 1 heart-shaped rock, 2 odd grains, and a story about a cornstalk that spoke. She shook her head and said, "One day's travel, a whole sack of nonsense." And you nodded, curled up on your straw bed, and exhaled. Travel didn't require a suitcase. Just guts, stale bread, and the ability to fake a local accent when absolutely necessary. After nearly a month surviving mud pits, mutant turnips, vague laws, and roosters with no respect for clocks, you start to understand. If you don't adapt, you'll soon become just another fireside story. So how did medieval folks make it? Not with muscles, with a survival strategy best described as, whoever hesitates ends up fetching water. Step 1. Befriend the right people. Not nice people, useful people. Like the blacksmith. He's got tools and gossip. You smile at the right time, gift him an onion when it counts, and boom. Next time you need your sickle sharpened, you skip the line in front of Giles, who always forgets to pay anyway. Step 2. Master the art of answering without saying anything. When asked, do you believe wheat can talk? You never say no, too risky, or yes, even riskier. You go with, I've heard my grandmother say she once heard someone say, safe, subtle, and if anyone asks further, you blame grandma. Step 3. Always carry emergency food. A baked potato, half a crusty loaf, maybe a moldy chunk of cheese. You'll need it when you get stuck in a crowded market, a 3-hour village meeting, or a surprise mass where you're punished for walking ungracefully. Grandma once gave you survival wisdom: garlic in the mouth, salt in the hand, a heart with no bad thoughts. Garlic for evil spirits, salt for bad luck, and a pure heart so you don't get accused of witchcraft just for laughing at the wrong time. You learn to sleep anywhere, by the hearth, under the eaves, next to the pig pen, surprisingly warm, unless you get assigned pig-chasing duties. Once, you nodded off during Mass. An old lady jabbed your ribs with a wooden spoon and whispered, "The Lord does not bless snorers." The true survivors are those who hide their emotions. See the village cat stealing food? Stay silent. Hear someone mess up a prayer? Smile politely. Accused of making bread too crunchy? Bow your head, promise to knead with your heart next time. You adapt to everything. One rainy day, you slip and fall. People laugh. You rise, lift a hand, and declare, "I was reenacting St. Martin's stumble." Suddenly, humiliation becomes holy performance art. You know when to speak and when to sing. During a heated argument in the market, you strum a lute and sing, "Harmony is light." No one understood it, but the shouting stopped for 12 seconds. That's a win. You've been hungry, very, but you mastered smart eating. Bite slowly, sniff before chewing, share evenly, because if you don't, the old woman next to you will glare so hard it'll roast your onion from across the room. You become a storyteller. Good tales earn you bread, front row seats at festivals, and sometimes, your life. Once accused of insulting the priest, you spun a tale. I dreamt of him riding a dragon to save the village. People clapped. You survived. You memorize everyone's pet peeves. Giles hates age jokes. Margaret can't stand burnt bread mentions. Avoid those topics. You just gained 30 more years of peace. You listen to gossip, not to believe it, just to record it. Who's suspected of theft? Who's maybe a witch? Who coughed during Mass without confession? Log it. Stay prepared. You carry a lucky charm. Even if it's just a turnip-shaped rock, you believe in it. At the very least, when someone asks, "Do you have protection?" you can wave it confidently. You read the sky, listen to the wind, and communicate entire conversations with a glance. We won't say it aloud, but yes, that soup was disgusting. You endure the cold by imagining heat. Shivering in church, you picture 9 people and 3 cats huddled by the fire. Suddenly, you feel warmer. Maybe. You learn to let go. Lose an onion? Don't cry. Say, perhaps it went to a better place. Punished for frowning during service? Close your eyes. Meditate. And you live. Not through full bellies or fine coats, but through sidestepping danger, understanding people, pretending to believe, and learning to actually laugh. Because in the Middle Ages, survival wasn't just about not dying. It was an art form. And you, just a skinny little peasant, have become a true artist of staying alive. You've survived drought, disease, moldy bread, and Margaret's disapproving glare. You thought maybe, just maybe, you were safe. Then, the horn blew. War. And suddenly you realize, in the Middle Ages, it didn't matter if you liked fighting. You could still be yanked out of bed and tossed into a mud pit called duty. Wars erupted for all kinds of reasons. A king got impatient, someone insulted the queen's nose, or a map was missing a squiggly border. Your village had nothing to do with any of it, but suddenly got labeled as logistics support. You didn't know what that meant until the next morning when you were handed 3 buckets, 1 dented pot, and told to boil water for the spear unit. You're not a soldier, but you don't escape. Every able body gets a task: digging trenches, cooking meals, patching trousers, or, if unlucky, becoming an accidental human shield. You once got assigned flag bearer. Sounded important. Until you realized the flag was 3 meters tall, clanged with every gust of wind, and attracted arrows like a torch draws moths. No training. Your weapon is a borrowed spear from last year, slightly rusted, slightly bent. Armor? A thick piece of cloth. Helmet? A repurposed grain tin with a painted chicken on it. You travel in a group. Hungry, tired, and stinking. Someone collapses. You carry them. Someone faints. You drag them. Someone cries. They get yelled at. Someone sings. They get applauded, then forced to sing all night long. Battle? Nothing like the stories. Just screaming, dust, and people roaring whose side they're on. Unclear. You don't see the enemy. Just feet. Because you're lying flat on the ground, hugging your head, whispering, "Please hit the helmet." Once you got sent to the front lines. Reason? You're small, harder to hit. You were a messenger, crawling through grass, stung by bees, slipped into a ditch, and returned with 2 letters no one could read anymore. They were soaked in mud and panic. War food, even thinner than everyday gruel. 1 spoon of beans, 3 strands of greens, and a pep talk. Eat up so you can fight better tomorrow. You swallowed like swallowing grief. But you smiled, because someone shared half an onion with you. Sleep. Outside. On dirt. Next to strangers. Every noise makes you flinch. Every dream is a nightmare. One guy screamed, "I'm the king," in his sleep. Got muzzled with a stew pot to avoid revealing the camp's location. One night it rained hard. The trenches flooded. Everyone shivered. One guy climbed into a flour sack and slept. Another climbed into someone else's arms. Warmer, but in the morning, nobody remembered who was who. You watched people fall. The friend who once helped carry wood home, now motionless. You didn't cry. Just stared. Then picked up another sack of powder and moved on. Because if you stopped, you'd be lying next to him. War doesn't care about right or wrong, only about who lives to tell the tale, and who's forgotten. You once dug graves for 7 men. Didn't know their names. Just remembered one of them snored like a dragon and told terrible jokes. When victory was declared, no cheers. Just breathing. If someone still had all their teeth, they were considered lucky. You came back to the village. Pants torn. Shirt dirty. Eyes dimmed by the memory of bugles from another valley. You hoped for a warm welcome. The village just said, "Time to plant the beans." You grabbed a hoe, got to work, and understood. In this world, surviving isn't rewarded. It just earns you more tasks. And you told the story, not like some heroic saga, but like a storm that came, howled, and left behind invisible scars everyone carried quietly. You lay down, hands aching, heart still beating, which means you're alive. And in the Middle Ages, that was enough. You've survived 28 chapters of life. Poverty, war, communal foot odor. And you're still here, breathing in and out. But in the Middle Ages, living was just the phase before dying. And death, well, it happened like mealtimes. Often, suddenly, and usually without anyone bothering to chew. Death wasn't some grand finale. It was a quiet disappearance. One day, you'd see your neighbor watering vegetables. The next, gone. Ask around. Where is he? He went. Went where? Probably to the Lord. That's it. There were no hospitals, no medical escorts. You got sick. Your family lit a candle, boiled water, and called the priest. If you survived, miracle. If not, God's will. Your uncle once fainted from heat stroke and never got back up. People just said, "Guess God needed a gardener." Funerals? Modest to the point of whisper. Wrap the body in rough cloth, carry it outside the village, bury it. Sometimes no marker, just a rock with a vague scratch. One said, "Kind old man." Another, "Lady known for dry bread." You once attended a funeral. Everyone stood around, nobody cried too loudly. for fear it might disturb the dead. A child asked, "Where did he go?" Grandma replied, "To a place with better porridge." Everyone nodded, because the porridge here was terrible. There were no fancy tombstones, no sad music, but there were biscuits. After the burial, people ate, not to celebrate, but to keep going. Dry bread, watery tea, and old jokes about how the deceased once fell in a well chasing a chicken. Death in the Middle Ages wasn't a stranger, it was part of the furniture. People didn't deny it, didn't run, they accepted it. Those who lived well were remembered. Those who were controversial were remembered too, with an added, "so you know what not to do." You once heard the tale of a 94-year-old lady, survived 3 plagues, 4 winters, 2 wars. She died in her sleep, still smiling. People said, she went like she lived, bothering no one. That was the best kind of death around here. Some were buried with their favorite possessions. One man with his wooden spoon, been with me from mush to gruel. One woman with her straw pillow, not because it was soft, but because it smelled familiar. You worried you'd be forgotten. But then you saw. Here, memory isn't in statues, it's in stories. Every night by the fire, your name gets passed on. Remember when they once said, and whether it's something funny or foolish, you live on in laughter. You once asked the priest, "What happens after death?" He shrugged. Could be light, could be silence, but definitely no more taxes. You exhaled in peace. The truth is, you're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of being forgotten. But then you realize, no one is forgotten who ever shared a biscuit, carried a bucket, or lent a coat on a cold day. You once planted a cabbage, at the right time, with the right sun. It grew. It bloomed. Weird, but real. And everyone remembered, that was your cabbage. After you were gone, the cabbage still grew. People ate its leaves, told stories. The cabbage singer. You smiled, even while lying still beneath it. You don't need a fancy grave. Just someone who says your name without asking, who? You understand now. Life is sowing. Death is resting. And if you lived richly enough, kindly enough, when it's your time, they won't cry. They'll laugh. And they'll tell stories. And you smile, ready. Not because you're tired of life, but because you know it's time to turn the page. You look back on the journey. 29 days of surviving mud, dry bread, badly timed yawns, and bizarre lawsuits like the chicken stared too long at the cat. And yet, you're still here. Eyes open, heart beating, scalp itchy, thanks to straw. But alive. If you've truly made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a medieval person, you are a living legend. Not because you were rich, strong, or clever, but because you nodded at the right time, smiled just enough, and avoided the gaze of the village elder who suspected everyone of witchcraft. You learned how to plow a field without tearing your shirt, how to hear gossip without getting dragged into it, how to cough during Mass without being accused of heresy. You knew who to step aside for, who deserved a polite chuckle, and who you should absolutely never ask, "Still alive and well these days?" You once knocked on a stranger's door, slept beside a fire, ate burnt bread, and said thank you, even though the stew may have contained cat whiskers. You never gave up, even the time you were asked to read scripture out loud, while urgently needing to pee. You witnessed death, weddings, births, and shouting matches over whose foot crushed a basket of onions. You remember every smile, every wave of sweat, every off-key flute solo. And you no longer feel alone. You're not a victim of your era. You're living proof of adaptation. Even when kicked out of your straw bed, even after 4 days of watery porridge, even while wearing a helmet made from a broken cooking pot, you smiled. A real smile. You didn't wait for a miracle. You became one. When you gave your blanket to a freezing old lady. When you sang badly but still got applause. When you rescued the cat trapped in the pickle jar. You were the faint glow of hope in a time without moisturizer and full of mosquitoes. And if you ever leave, into the forest, across the sea, or just to the market, you'll be remembered by someone saying, once, they, and someone will laugh, chew a turnip, and carry on the tale. You don't need a statue. You're already part of the story. And now, you breathe softly. All the noise fades. The wind no longer slaps your face. It strokes your hair like a lullaby. The scent of the hearth drifts further away, leaving only the warm ghost of ash and the whisper of straw, gently urging, "Sleep now." You close your eyes. No more reciting prayers. No more dodging the village rooster's glare. No more tiptoeing to the toilet in the freezing dark. You've made it. One day, one life, one long journey through a world where survival itself was a miracle. The straw bed feels soft now, like a memory. The lumpy pillow has become familiar, and your father's snoring, if you listen closely, sounds like the whole village breathing as one. You no longer fear the bell of tomorrow morning. You've grown into it. All the oddities, all the confusion, now have a name: experience. And if you dream, let it be of golden fields, slanted sunlight, a warm pot of stew, and someone singing nearby, lyrics unclear, melody tender. Sleep now. You've lived a medieval life. Not perfect, but deeply real.